It all started just prior to last Easter, when Phil and Doffy Prentice sold up their home at 43 Gallipoli Crescent. Between you and me, they got a very nice price. And Phil told me on the quiet they got what they asked. They sold to an exceptionally nice young couple with a pair of youngsters too, who looked as though they'd take a real interest in the garden. When I first heard the new people were at Clive and Glenda Nettleton, it didn't ring a bell. But Beryl said to me, Nettleton. Then she remembered that Valda Clissold's younger sister Wanda had married a Brian Hiscock, one of the Hiscock boys, who worked in exactly the same office, so it eventuated, as a Clive Nettleton, who had married an old school friend of Wanda's by the name of Glenda Hibbertson, and who now had a couple of kiddies, boy 6, girl 8. Put it another way. When Beryl was in Bethesda having her veins done, she met Valda Clissold, who was in the next bed. They got on like a house on fire, and later on, through young Valda, we met her sister Wanda. Now, the amazing part about it was that Wanda Hiscock, who was a Wanda Clissold, had been to school with a Glenda Hibbertson, who later on had married a Clive Nettleton, who worked in exactly the same office as her husband. It sounds a bit on the complicated side, I know, but it's not if you think that Valda Clissold, who was in Bethesda with Beryl, has a brother-in-law, Brian Hiscock, one of the Hiscock boys, who works in exactly the same office as the husband of her sister Wanda's old school friend, Glenda Hibbertson. Isn't it a small world? Naturally, we made ourselves known, and it wasn't very long after that that young Glenda Nettleton was knocking on the back door. A cup of icing sugar, a drop of cochineal, cream of tartar, the odd lemon. I told Beryl to watch it, or she'd be letting herself in for a lot of babysitting. And sure enough, before we knew where we were, they were round here for afternoon tea. Plus young Wayne and Marilyn. Oh, but what a bonza pair of youngsters they were, a couple of little trimmers. Clive Nettleton hadn't had a real break from work since the marriage, and she was a bundle of nerves and as thin as a rake. So seeing as they were tantamount to being friends of ours, through the Clissold girls, Beryl and I had a bit of a confab in the kitchen, and we intimated to them that we were desirous to mind the youngsters for them over the Easter period, while they had a bit of a breather down at her people's home. Well, they hummed and ha'd. They said they wouldn't dream of it. You don't want a little boy of 6 1/2 and a girl of 8 under your feet. I said, don't talk a lot of twaddle. I said, the offer's there, you're a young couple, you might as well take the chance while you can. To tell you the truth, we'd fallen for those kiddies like a ton of bricks. Well, I wouldn't take no for an answer, and Glenda Nettleton could see with half an eye that Beryl was scrupulous, and the tinies 'ud be well catered for at Kiora. On the Thursday before Easter, I got home from the office early to see if there was anything I could do to help Beryl. I brought home a few Smarties and jelly beans and licorice, all sorts too, but Beryl put her foot down and said I'd spoil their tea. She had everything beautifully under control, and she sent me down the street to get some extra milk if the little man was open. I chased all over the blessed shop, and by the time I got back, Wayne and Marilyn had had their tea and had almost finished their bath. I put my head round the corner to see if I could take over, give the wife a bit of a break. She sent me into the lounge room to warm their Jim Jams. While I was in there, I had a bit of a hunt through my books for something suitable. The Pictorial Atlas, the first year of war in pictures, the second year of war in pictures, the third year of war in pictures, the fifth year of war in pictures, the fourth year of war in pictures, the Illustrated Family Doctor, Soldiering On, the Great Book of Humour, the Story of the World in pictures. I found a couple of my old Sunday school prizes in the long run, but when Beryl came in to collect their pyjamas, she said they'd brought their naughty books with them. I was going through one of my cupboards and I came across a whole album of my old Hawaiian records. Oh, goodness knows what's happened to the little HMV instrument we used to play them on. Hula Moon, My Honolulu Baby, Ukulele Lady, Lovely Hula Hands, melodies Beryl and I used to dance to years ago. Amazing, really, the amount of junk you keep. Well, the Sandman came in the long run. We left the light on in the hall, and Beryl and I settled down to watch the instrument. On the Good Friday, I thought I'd take them up to Wattle Park for a play on the swings and seesaws and a picnic lunch. I didn't take the vehicle on account of the Easter toll. We couldn't make a start until late-ish though, as public transport on a Good Friday is very ragtime. Had to phone up the depot and they put me through to a lass who certainly wasn't born on this side of the world. Beryl had cut some delicious sandwiches. Egg and lettuce, peanut butter, Marmite and walnut, cheese and apricot jam, and lots of bread and butter and hundreds and thousands, and one of her own specialities, a chocolate and banana log. She'd only baked it that morning, and the kiddies were most intrigued. Beryl said if they promised to behave themselves at Wattle Park, they could lick the beaters. We'd packed some of Beryl's homemade ginger beer and a thermos for ourselves, but unfortunately, Beryl forgot to put the greaseproof paper round the cork appertaining to the calamine lotion bottle we use for the milk, with the resultant consequence that By the time we got off the bus, the milk had soaked right through the sandwiches and halfway up the log. As if that wasn't enough, it ruined the lining of a raffia bag that Beryl had bought at the opportunity shop. However, it wasn't altogether wasted, as Beryl said she could use it for the pigs. Not to be deterred, young Wayne and Marilyn were as happy as a couple of sandboys, playing round on the swings and seesaws and climbing all over the memorial cannon. However, I didn't want to make it too long a day, as I was quite anxious to get home and tune into the Good Friday appeal. Beryl and I always give a little something, but we've never heard ourselves called out. Well, I tried to listen in for a while, but it was well nigh impossible. Beryl had buttered some hot cross buns, and the kiddies were in their nighties and crying out for the instrument. On the Saturday morning, Wayne and Marilyn were as good as gold, playing out there on the back lawn while Beryl kept an eye on them through the kitchen window. I was round the front doing a spot of watering. After that summer we had, the nature strip was on its last legs. No rest for the wicked. I jolly nearly forgot their Easter eggs, but I shot down the street and caught the little man, who told me if I'd left it another 5 minutes I would have been stiff. The eggs I got weren't exactly identical, but they were the only two procurable. Oh, we had a good old laugh that afternoon too, I can tell you. Beryl had gone through the camphor chest and dug out a lot of old clothes she'd been meaning to give to the Holy Trinity jumble sale, and those kiddies gave us a real concert. Young Marilyn's been having ballet lessons at Madame Thelma's Academy at the Cub Hall on Wednesdays and Fridays, and she got up there on her toes and danced like a little fairy. Beryl said to see that kiddie made her wish she'd kept up with her own lessons. Not to be deterred, young Wayne was all dressed up like Lord Muck, clopping round in a pair of Beryl's high-heel shoes, lipstick all over his chops, bangles and earrings and goodness knows what. He was wearing everything but the kitchen sink and showing off something terrific too, but we had to laugh. You should have seen his face. It was a picture no artist could paint. You can't leave them alone 5 minutes, though. They must have got into the camphor chest and dug out an old lingerie box where Beryl keeps some of her very personal things. Anyway, when we came back into the room, they'd eaten the icing off a bit of our wedding cake that Beryl had treasured for 32 years. What can you say to other people's kiddies? If they'd have been children of mine, it would have been a case of Paddy whacked the drumsticks and no bones about it. However, we packed them off to bed. Beryl said if they didn't behave themselves, the Easter Bunny wouldn't be calling. It worked like a charm, and there wasn't another peep out of them after that. There's no doubt about it. Beryl's marvellous with kiddies. Well, the Easter Bunny called next morning, but there was merry hell to pay. Their eggs weren't exactly identical. Different coloured silver paper. One of them didn't like dark chocolate anyway. Before we knew where we were, they were fighting like cat and dog. Young Marilyn turned on the waterworks, and Wayne, who's a real little tease, kept on pulling faces, even though we told him the wind might change. You can't reason with some children. However, they were as right as rain before you can say Jack Robinson, and after they'd had their brekkie, I decided I'd run them across to the Holy Trinity Sunday School so they wouldn't miss out on their coloured stickers. I gave them their collection money and decided I'd wait for them round the corner in the vehicle in Farlap Road. Oh, they got some lungs on them, some of them. I could hear those kiddies singing with the window up. Hear the pennies dropping. Sunday school is over and we are going Beryl had a leg of lamb waiting for us when we got home, and seeing as we got the dinner over and done with early, I decided to risk it and run them down to Half Moon Bay, just there and back to see how far it was. Wasn't the only one with that idea either, so it eventuated. The traffic on Marine Parade was terrific, and the kiddies were like a wagon load of monkeys. By the time I'd got there and found a decent posse with a view of the beach, Wayne got one of his blood noses and the car radio packed up. Marilyn kept grizzling and wanting to get out of the car, but I had to draw the line at that. A man doesn't want kiddies carting half the beach through his vehicle and scratching a brand new pair of seat protectors. Besides, I'd had to get out once before, you know, when Wayne wanted to spend a penny. He's really too much of a little man now to go with Beryl and his sister. Of course, they were overtired and overexcited, so we called it a day and I ran them back to Gallipoli Crescent. They only picked at their tea, and by the time we'd packed the little scallywags off to bye-byes, Beryl and I were almost too fagged to enjoy the instrument. I was really just as glad that Clive and Glenda were due back on the Easter Monday to take the youngsters off our hands, because to tell you the truth, Beryl was beginning to look very peaky. And I thought, if this goes on much longer, she'll be a cot case. I really think you've got to be cut out to cope with children. Not that Wayne and Marilyn were any trouble. We were tickled to bits to have them round the place, but you can have too much of a good thing and they really eat into your time. One way and another, everything being equal, and to all intents and purposes, Beryl and I lead a pretty full sort of life, and goodness only knows how we'd have managed if we'd ever embarked on a family. Far too busy, that was our trouble. You've got to have a bit of finance behind you too. You can't feed and clothe a family out of thin air. Decent schooling cost a packet in this day and age appertaining to that. Alan Chapman tells me some of the fees they're asking and getting are absolutely ridiculous. To that, Beryl isn't a terribly well type of person. There's nothing organically wrong with her. She's never ill. She just isn't 100%. It strikes me if you're going to embark on a family, you have to take all the particular factors appertaining to it into a certain amount of consideration. Look what happens when they grow up. They either wipe their boots on you, or they marry the first one that comes along and pack you off to a twilight home. I've seen it happen time and time again. You look at these beatniks and juvenile delinquents. When I look at young Wayne and Marilyn, I can't help thinking it's a pity they have to grow up. Clive and Glenda collected the youngsters in the vicinity of 7:30. We were all in the lounge room viewing the instrument when the door chimes went, and they shot to the door like greased lightning. Young Marilyn was clutching the Easter bunny we'd given her, and young Wayne was still wearing a pair of Beryl's high heels, the little Turk. Of course, Clive and Glenda were very appreciative of what we had done, but between you and me, I don't think they realised the half of it. Anyway, what with all the farewells and goodbyes, there was that much pandemonium I forgot to put the tins out. The place seems quiet without them, of course, but those few days took a lot out of Beryl, and she got quite weepy when they went. You don't mind doing the neighbourly thing once in a while, but it's nice to get back to your own interests. Can you keep a secret? I don't suppose you can. You mustn't laugh and you mustn't cry, but do the best you can.